quorum? I'm getting ahead of myself. We've got 1, 2, 3. No.
Yes, we're at quorum.
All right. Do we expecting that there was anyone else from RSVPs? I don't know if anyone on the call is aware of that, because otherwise I would be inclined to jump right in, but I want to give folks a chance if they were expected to be here. Another minute or two.
I've not heard back yet from Renell Ellis. That's our last member. So I think for the sake of everyone's time, we can move forward.
Okay.
Unless Chris, you heard anything.
Haven't heard
Got
it.
it.
I would support getting it rolling as well.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I often do an intro thing, and we've got veteran folks here. So I think everyone's been through some orientation of where we are. And with that in mind, I would think that we should jump into our agenda. I would put that in my share screen now, if I may. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that's coming through, and then awesome. Everybody can see where we are with welcome, introduction, and announcements. And seeing that, I think let's just take the moment to go around the space, and rather than the uncertainty of who's going next, we've got a small group. I'm just gonna invite each person to talk rather than like, please pass the next person. So I'm Jeff Landau, Public Defender's Office, and also here is representative of the Racial Justice Coalition, Contra Costa County, a steering committee member. Glad to be with you all. Let me invite Kiki to say hi.
Hello, sorry, I was having a moment trying to find my mute button. I am Kiki Williams, probation manager, specifically involved in prevention and foster care and juvenile and adult investigations.
Thanks, Kiki. How about Patrice?
Hi, everyone. Patrice Guillory here with the Office of Reentry and Justice. Happy to be here.
Glad you're here. Chris, I'll invite you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris James, Racial Justice and Wellbeing Associate with the W. Hayward Burns Institute. I'm glad to be here as well.
Fantastic. Hi, Marcus.
Hi, everyone. Marcus Walton, representing Superintendent Lynn Mackey at the Contra Costa County Office of Education. My apologies, I will have to jump off at 4 p.m. for another meeting.
Thanks, Marcus. We'll get moving. No worries. How about Joanna?
Hey everyone, Joanna Lowry with the Hayward Burns Institute. Good to see you all tonight, or afternoon for California.
Good to see you too. How about Christina?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christina Jackson with the Office of Reentry and Justice. I'm one of the planner evaluators on this team. And today I'm here in stepping in for Nicole, and I'll be taking notes.
Thanks, Christina. How about Cheryl? Hi, Cheryl. You're unmuted, but I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, your volume is very low. I can actually hear it, but it's really, really low.
Got to get my hearing checked now. All right, Cheryl, I'm going to circle back. And that may just be me. Okay. Hi, Jill. How about introducing yourself for a moment?
Hey there, Jill Ray with the Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson.
Thanks for being here, Jill. And Renell, you're with us. Hi, Renell. We're just going around introducing name and org that we're representing. Okay, no, connecting to audio. There you go. So I was thinking this is starting to. Hi, Renell.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey there. Glad that you're on the call. Are you able to hear us all right?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you fine. I got a situation. I'm having to work from home because my daughter's in the hospital and I got her kids, so just trying to do double duty.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that daughter's in the hospital, and I respect what what you need to do. If whatever that is, if it requires to step away from the call, then it's understood because you're dealing with unexpected circumstances here. So glad you're able to join us for the time that you can, and thanks for now.
No
Let
problem. I'm
me-
here. I'll be
Awesome.
here. Yep.
Fantastic.
Hey.
Stephanie, let me invite you to say hi.
Hi, everyone. Stephanie with the Rise Center, also on our job, but not this committee.
Just doing extra credit here. Thank you for being here. And Cheryl, let me circle back and see if how audio is working.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. I got you.
Cheryl said it. The Racial Justice Coalition, the steering committee for that group, as well as the oversight body. Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks.
Glad you're here. Okay, so we've gone around our room, and if there are announcements at this time before we get to anything else that's on agenda, I think that this is a space that it's kind of like public comment for those that are sitting on the subcommittee, although we already have our agenda. So if anyone has an announcement before we would jump into public comment, I would give this moment. And if not, would launch into public comment and see if there is any that we have. Of course, I knew the essential nature of public comment even before my Brown Act retraining, but it has been a refresher, and that's my public service announcement about get your credits done. I'm nearly done with mine. I think folks know what I'm talking about with having to get our check-ins about Brown Act requirements, as well as the fair or better government requirements. So enough said on that. Maybe that we had the space for public comment, and it seems not hearing any at this time. The door remains open, and we'll have it for each of our agenda items. Okay, moving ahead. Approving record of actions from last time. I'm going to start to scroll down, and we'll all have a chance to just take a look. It was in our packet, of course, which we're going through, but just to remember who is there not at this part, and that that's all accurate. I'm looking at our actions in red here, the notes of those. I think that there was anything that I had that needed to be modified from my perspective. I know I'm going pretty quickly through these, and folks likely have it too. Rolling through. Okay, so we're there. And all that we'd be doing at this point is just making sure accurate, complete. Anyone see anything that they would want to have changed, modified? Not hearing anything. I would invite a motion to approve the record of actions. If anyone feels the inclination.
I can.
Thank you. All right, so hearing the motion from Kiki to approve, second?
Second.
Thanks, Marcus. Okay, so motion to approve, we've got the second. Any comment on this before we do our roll call? All right, this is the moment, I think. Was there public comment on this, on our record of actions? Little window there. Hearing none, I think we're ready to take our roll call vote.
Okay. Kiki, you motion, so I take it as an aye.
Yes, aye.
Jeff,
Yes.
Marcus, you second,
Yes.
and Renell. I
Yes.
didn't hear you. Oh, there we go. Got you. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, we're rolling. And let's just keep moving ahead. Standing agenda item for JJCC updates. And here's where I would turn to Kiki to give us any news if you have any.
Sure. Well, I wish I had more news, but we did meet on the 6th and which was Monday, I think, and discussed kind of the survey outreach. And unfortunately, despite sort of multiple attempts and what I would refer to as warm calls, there have not been as many responses as we would hope. So there was a lot of conversation about that, some discussion about potentially using our partners over at the ORJ to combine outreach efforts, and then some discussion about taking this issue back to the full body discussion for the JJCC on the 15th. And that was pretty much the gist of what we talked about and sort of hashed out.
Yeah, thank you for giving that update, the context, Kiki. I'm just wondering if I don't know if it's really our business to look into, but I guess we're interested in trying to move forward the responses because it ties in with our capacity fund work for sure, and maybe also some of our other priorities. If you have thoughts on what maybe, like my mind is starting to be, is it a long survey for people to fill out? They feel like this is too much time for me to do, or?
We talked about that too, because in the sort of very beginning stages of development, we talked about sort of a short preliminary survey and then move into the longer, more detailed one based on those responses. So that actually did come up again. And I think we talked about sort of reconsidering if we should go to a shorter format. And then there was some conversation about just maybe the timing. You know, there's just a lot going on right now. And then some discussion about sort of what some of the barriers might be to folks, you know, wanting to participate in a county funded program, and just, you know, being a little bit more realistic about the expectations, but certainly some frustrations because we would like to give some money away to people who are, you know, providing some services, but we're still experiencing these challenges. So I think that's some of the stuff that we're going to present to the larger body, just for some consideration and input about how we might re-strategize.
Yeah. Well, that seems only natural that there be some frustration under the circumstances, and that it's right that you're recognizing that and trying to see how to pivot and continue to work. I mean, especially as you're saying, this isn't just posting of flyers, it's really direct reaching out to people. And so you're doing the work that would need to reach to folks. And yeah, we remain, I know in this subcommittee, wanting to try to support that if there's any way that we can. We know that there's already work that's going on in JJCC, and it's there's the resources needed there, but it's important for us to kind of have the updates. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chris?
I have a quick question. Do you all have a deadline, as far as like a hard deadline, as far as when you're looking for responses? And I ask that question because, you know, just in terms of sort of talking about getting the word out and all of, you know, that, I'm wondering if the community forum that we're trying to plan could be a place to plug it, or to, you know, post a link for the survey and just kind of, share what the survey is for, right? As we're telling the story of what disparities look like right now by race and ethnicity in the community, saying we know that this is an issue. We want to create opportunities for community resources, programs, and supports, to step in on behalf of, the folks in our community, as opposed to them going into the system. This is potentially a way that we could begin building those partnerships. And so we'd love to have more participation. I wonder if we're looking at like a February date. So I don't know if that would be too late. That's why I was asking about the partner.
Well, to be honest, the deadline that we set for ourselves has come and gone. So we're continuing to work on it. I don't know how to really answer the question about a deadline now, because I think we reached kind of an impasse, but I can certainly, even now, I can search in my email and get the link and just share it. I mean, because we've shared it, I've shared it in other forums. So, I mean, it's there and we're continuing to take feedback. So I don't see any problem with you, using the link however it is that you can to be, helpful. And just really kind of get it out there. Chances are some of the folks that you might be sharing it with, the agency might already kind of be on that list that we created back in August, but maybe it's just going to the wrong person, or, because that's one possibility as well, is that we developed all these contacts, which are the people that we sent links to directly. And maybe that's just not the right person anymore because it's been a few months now. So, any help would be appreciated. And I can certainly share back any information, from now until our next PICE meeting in the interim, for things for us to consider if anyone has suggestions.
Stephanie?
Yeah, right now, like Kiki said, we're just trying to get responses from people. I think like the community forum or the listening session, that would be a good place to potentially get some feedback from people. I think one of the things that's been hard too is just getting emails out and not necessarily being able to talk directly with people about, what the survey is and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to get what we're trying to get the information for. And so I think if there can be like a little explanation on why the survey is out there and why we're trying to get the information, that could be good if it's in that type of setting.
Well, great. That was good follow-up, Chris, to be seeing if maybe one of our next kind of public spaces where we'd be able to reach out, would this be worthwhile to try to do? So yeah, let's do that. And maybe there's nothing more on our end at this time, but just being aware that that's coming. And I know what I was thinking is, Kiki, you were saying it could be some of the same folks that have already been the reach out. And if they're anything like me, sometimes they're like, oh yeah, I was meaning to do that. I'm glad that we're talking about it now and I'm going to follow up. So just sometimes another contact can do it, even if it's already reached out. So is there anything more on this, on our standing agenda item that folks want to chime in about? Okay. Then, and public comment on that one? I meant to include that, but I'll just say, was there any public comment on this? Not hearing. I'm going to move ahead to our community forum session, ditching listening, for responding to a number of different voices saying, let's not have listening as part of the name, despite our agenda language that we're talking about having it as a community forum on systems data. We can work on exactly how we say what data is, and I think maybe we can follow lead of data subcommittee. They may be captioning it in a particular way that we could just take that language of, we're calling it justice systems, or we're calling it systems, or whatever we're doing, but it would be a community forum on that. So maybe we can jump to our attachment 2, page 7. I'm going to start to scroll down and take us to goals. Maybe I can zoom in just a little bit. so folks can see a little bit better. And I'll give, I was trying to have that a little bit better. Okay, yeah. Credit to Chris here for putting the structure here, the initial kind of template for us to be working on. And Chris, you and I did have the chance to talk about this doc in advance. And I know also that Shayla in recent call was able to also, as we were just prepping for what this meeting would be. So it's informed by those conversations. And when we were having those prep conversations, we're saying this really needs to just be an invitation, a suggestion, rather than this is what it is, because this is the place where we would hammer it out. But it's trying to incorporate the conversations we've already had and invite moving forward. So, Chris, what do you think? Would you want to maybe walk through this as a first roll through?
Sure. Thank you. So two things. First of all, we were not able to have our meeting last month. So even sort of the concept of this has grown and developed a little bit since this was written. But this was meant to be a jumping off point. And obviously, with a lot of the subcommittees in the R job, we've done a lot of wordsmithing and whatnot. And this, I just want to be clear, this is not that. Because this is literally just to organize our thoughts. So we don't have to change this language because this language isn't going anywhere. It's for us as we develop sort of the agenda and the layout for this forum. And, so I think it's Cheryl who has brought up, several times as we talk about this, like, what is the purpose of this? Why are you doing this? Why is this important? And you need to know that, if you're going to go before the public or before, community folks with this information. And so just sort of trying to at least begin to answer that question and thinking through, the most important things for the body to share, and hopefully the most important types of feedback, that we can get from folks who attend, right? So number one being data transparency. Obviously, it's important for folks to know in terms of the criminal legal system, what data there is, and for them to have a sense of sort of what the outcomes currently are, right, in the county, right? And so making sure that folks have a sense of what that data is, what it says, what the stories are behind that information, as well as accurate interpretation and takeaways, right? So not just showing people charts and graphs and saying you're on your own, but walking them through sort of takeaway statements and, how you read that or how you might, what are some of the best sort of ways to frame it or say it or talk about it. Not because we think anybody is, is lacking, a level of sophistication necessarily, but just because, there's a lot of information. So there can be ways that you might read. I mean, I bring this up a lot. I looked at a graph that I shouldn't have been trying to interpret on the fly one time in a meeting like this. It went left really fast, right? So you can do that, right? If you don't have sort of information, especially when you're trying to share something with the public, just making sure that, that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's as to this is what this says. And the last one on that rung of data transparency would be publicizing the data website, and we can add potentially to that the survey that we were just talking about. So there's a website now that exists that I think I have bookmarked now. Don't ask me to rattle it off the top of my head, but I think I have it bookmarked in my browser, and we would definitely want anyone who's attending this forum to know that they don't have to wait for one of these forums to see this information, right? That it is published for them. It's not a dashboard yet, so they can't necessarily manipulate it, but they can see it, look at it in real time, look at those charts and see that information. And so making sure that folks are aware of that. In addition to that, the RJLB's data work to date, and to be quite honest, This is because a lot of work has been done by the data subcommittee, not only in the data that it currently receives and data that it currently sort of shares and compiles, but also in data that has been requested and that we currently do not have access to or currently is not being shared. When folks in the public see this information, there are going to be quite obvious holes, I think, in some of it, right? Like, or more accurately, there will be agencies that are not necessarily directly represented, and there may be questions about that, and those questions would be coming to the RJLB, right? Because you're sharing this data. Hey, where is this and this and this? And I think it's important for folks to know that you're in the process of have requested data from X, Y, and Z, and that that's not necessarily to be combative or whatever. It's just to share that on our end, what we can control, we've begun taking those steps and updating folks on where the process currently is. So I think that's going to be extremely important. And then the most important thing, I think, is getting community input and feedback about the data. Like, do you have any questions about this? Is any of it unclear? Do you have questions based on what you now know, based on this information, right? Like, what more do you want to see? What more are you curious about? What kinds of questions would you ask? Because data analysis of this kind is always a process. Unfortunately, if you think it's not, just talk to our good friends at probation, right? Shout out to Melvin. I've seen Melvin hold it together in all of these meetings and not, let us know exactly how he was really feeling when we start asking all these additional questions. But that's what we do with data, right? You see something at a high level and then you say, wait, but why, or what more can we know about that? And now somebody has to do some extra work, right, to get those answers. And so it would be the same sort of process here, at least in trying to get a sense of what community wants to know, because we know that we are anticipating getting more information from more agencies over time and doing this on a continuous basis, right? We don't want this to necessarily be the only time that we do a forum like this, especially when more data becomes available. And so having a sense of what people are interested in and what we can share with them would be helpful, as well as literal feedback about how the data was presented and how to better present it. Now, in addition to all of that, I think Shayla brought up that it would be a good idea to tell the story, the overall story of the RJLB, right? How did we get here, right? The community-led efforts over years that led us to the place where now you have a body that is meant to implement this list of recommendations, right? And so making sure that folks understand that and have a sense of that in the context of this work and this particular information that we're looking to share. So that was something that was added. And again, like we said, obviously it's probably going to be a little bit tacked on unless somebody is willing to jump in who attends JRCC meetings and wants to speak directly to it briefly toward the end or something like that, but wanting to sort of highlight the efforts in terms of the survey and folks trying to get a sense of where there are community-based organizations doing good work that need or could use county funds to help support the work as well.
So I'll jump in to say thank you, Chris, for walking us through that, the various parts of each of these steps. So this is a time I think we can invite feedback from folks. Maybe I would just also add to what Chris had said of kind of the additions that Shayla had mentioned about having the whole history for everybody of RJLB and even before the task force, and how did these recommendations even come about, and did you guys consider oversight, for example, or has there been any talk of that, and how are the people here decided to be a part of this thing anyway? And so, right, getting some of that history of this was a process that led to where we are. And then we also talked, I think, just internally about the concept of having some sort of quick system overview for folks of like, let's just orient ourselves again about police receive a call and then there's contact and then there may be an arrest and that may lead to filing and bail and each of these steps so that respecting people's already knowing some of this stuff and also not assuming all that knowledge, so there's just kind of be going over some of the relevant decision points for context. Cool.
Yeah.
So just,
Thanks for
yeah,
pointing
please.
it out. I definitely missed that, and I just wanted to add two quick things. So we've mostly had probation data up to this point. We should have sheriff's data by the date that we've proposed, which at first we were talking about, and I hate to sort of jump on later points or later parts of the agenda, but it's relevant. So at first we were talking about the first week in January, the first full week of work in January or something like that, the week of January 10th, I think it was. We've since pushed back to February 16th at 6 p.m. And by that date, we should have, so we already get sheriff's data, but we being the Burns Institute, should be able to analyze the sheriff's data and quantify it, right? Because it's a lot of individual level, one person, one charge. And so it's hard to get a sense of what the overall sort of trends and patterns of that information are. But that's information that we should have by that meeting. So we should be able to move forward with presenting that as well. And we're just awaiting, I think, a final okay from the sheriff's office. Melissa was going to go back and make sure that was okay. I can't call it, but I would think, that would just be a formality because we're talking about information that's already being shared by way of the agendas with the public if they want it. It would just be probably Denise sending that information over to us in an Excel spreadsheet as opposed to a PDF so that we can actually, calculate it and, make some graphs and tables out of it. So we should have additional information to share. And I think the quarterly meeting before this would be the first time we'd be able to sort of show that and prep for this forum.
Great. Thanks again, Chris, to just give us that further context that there will be hopefully some additional data that we can incorporate in, being expecting that. So having gone through this doc, I think the idea now would be that we can move forward by reporting to the various stakeholders, ultimately at our quarterly, that our subcommittee has given some thought, attention to this, and this is what we're kind of shaping moving forward. So to keep it from being what Chris and I and Shayla are saying, and to kind of open up to at least get a sense of this makes sense to me or doesn't make sense to me, maybe to just walk through as it's listed here. And I think also to just, if I'm remembering right, Shayla had proposed starting with 2 and then going to 1. So what if we were to start with the history first and who we are and all that stuff? Which I think, if I'm remembering, Chris, you and I were like, yeah, that's a good idea. We should probably start there. Okay, so with that in mind, let me go to that to number 2, data work to date, past and pending requests, plus, as we were just talking verbally together, including the RJOB history even more broadly, and then the task force before that. I'm kind of inclined to do like add the text as we're here. I don't know what folks think. I keep like trying to push a little bit with the tech stuff, but I would be thinking, right? And then I can start adding right here, data work to date plus RJOB history and RJTF. Yeah. Right. And then we can save this and it's kind of incorporating. we'll see. I don't know what folks think. Just keep acting and don't ask. But on number 2, feedback on this, like maybe how it should be done, what people would need to know if we're trying to give someone who's coming in without much history a quick orientation. Thoughts on how this might be done? Maybe even just in the context of, oh yeah, Chris, please.
Yeah, in addition to that, I was just going to ask if folks have been a part of similar meetings in the past, and based on that, have insight or input. We'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah, Renell.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it seems like, it seems like it should just, I mean, initially, I mean, you got to have a outline as the general information. And then
Renell, I don't know if it's only on my end, but I'm having difficulty hearing.
that, you know, you have to be willing and ready to provide other information as needed, based on the, you know, information that somebody might form. You know, just some general bullet points, some, you know, that you can, you know, just a general outline as to, you know, what it is we're putting forward.
Renell, I want to be hearing everything you're saying right now, and I don't know if I am. I'm pretty sure I'm not. Are others having difficulty hearing? Because your contributions here, Renell, are like priceless. So I really don't want to just be
So
okay. I know it's got to be, and as I appreciated before, you're doing double duty here. So no stress on the tech, but maybe in chat, or if others were able to hear a little bit more than I was. Okay, I think it was a little bit garbled, and that's just tech stuff. So I'm going to circle back, or we'll see how we can try to incorporate what you just said, because right, we definitely need your feedback. Chris, yeah.
Well, you got it in chat. Seems like we would have the general information placed in an outline, then other information available as needed. And that's what I was about to say. Based on what I could hear, it sounded like we were talking about an outline. And I would say, so we have a small working meeting scheduled for Monday. And that's small because it's just involving the hosts primarily of the folks who have agreed to host and sort of take the lead on presenting for the forum, which is Ronell and Shayla, as well as Jeff. And so I think definitely the goal for that working meeting is going to be to hammer out an outline that we can bring back in January and chop up.
Definitely. So yes, that makes sense to me too, that we're only going to be filling this in so much, but that that it has buy-in, right? So at the next stage, kind of saying before that it's not who even looked at this and who was on the thread to know what was happening. So kind of vetted by us that at a minimum, like who knows exactly how we present this, but yeah, we should be saying those things. We do need to give a little history of what came before, kind of doing a tone check on, yeah, we need to include that. And maybe I'll just propose to move ahead in the data transparency concept. And also, Chris, what you were saying, has anyone been in one of these before? I'll share my experience of trying to work through the old data set that we received back in 2015, I think it was, as the Racial Justice Coalition. And there's a chart that's been included in an agenda packets in various forms over the years that has these different system data points. And it's kind of like colored graph, and you've got these stacked information points that are there. And doing that at different community forums and it not landing, being like, this is dramatic, folks. Like, oh my gosh, this is incredible what this numbers are showing. And people are like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. So that's experience that I have bringing to this, being like, we do need to spend some time thinking about how we can get the information that we know is, if you understand it correctly, or if you're looking at it closely, at least from my perspective, I think of those us here, like, this is real problems, what these numbers show, and we need to do things about it. So to have that land with people and feel like they're registering what it is, and then everybody decides what they want to do about it, but make sure that it's not hidden in the way that it's presented. Anyone else been to a meeting like that where someone's talking at the chart and no one knows what that person's talking about, and it doesn't actually have any impact? Right, that happens. Thoughts on how we might do that, especially if we're not at a conference of, I don't know, professional Excel chart readers or something. We're here at a community forum, and how that might actually, we try to approach it knowing that we've got a number of different folks that are coming in with varying experience.
Jeff.
Please.
Yeah. So, and I think we've talked about this before. So I think it goes back to the previous comment, and Chris reiterated it, that I had, is what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is it that we want the public to know or get out of this? And that, I think, will inform how you present the data. For me, is something like, if you, yeah, I've been in plenty of forums where people just present a bunch of numbers and people are sitting there like, yeah, all right. Okay, and especially school board meetings, city council meetings, and the like. And it can get overwhelming. It's not that, I don't even think it's that people don't understand it. I think it's just, it's numbers. So what does that mean to my life? It means that 1 out of 8 of you, look around, 1 out of 3 of you, it means that the guy sitting next to you on either side of you, there's 3 of you in this front row. 1 out of 3 of you is going to end up in jail. Like that. Is that kind of very candid conversation that people need to hear. It's, how many children do you have, sir? How many of them are sons, sir? Okay, you have 3 sons? Well, do you have a bail fund? Because you're going to need it for one of the 3. That's what the statistics show. Is that kind of very candid conversation that needs to happen so that people understand that 1 out of 3 Black boys, 1 out of 2 and a third Black boys in Contra Costa County are going to end up in the criminal legal system. 1 out of, almost 3 Latinos are going to end up in the criminal legal system. 1 out of 5 white young men are going to end up in a criminal, like that. And I think that this is how you get away from just sticking numbers on the screen. Are you guys following me?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that sometimes it's not just numbers, it's what's the impact to my life? What's the impact to me as an individual? And then if you take that and you say, like, I love the graphic, there's a billboard. There's one in downtown Oakland. There's one, I saw it in LA when I was in Pasadena last week. And it shows how much money is being spent per incarcerated juvenile versus what's spent per for teaching a child in education per student, right? I think it's worth doing something like that to show how much money we're spending per juvenile in the juvenile justice system, per prisoner, and juxtapose that to per child we could be using in diversion program, per child we could be using in, you know, education or whatever, but using that so people can really see what these numbers mean. But just to get numbers on the screen, even if those numbers are the very same numbers that you use in showing this other data, doesn't really show people what that means. So like I said, I think we have to figure out what's the impact, what's the intent, and what's the impact of what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're giving specifics there, which helps move it forward. And as you're talking about it, I mean, I'm also just reminded that Chris, when we were talking with Shayla, thinking, are there ways that we can incorporate maybe video, other kind of different multimedia ways that can present the info if you're hearing someone else's voice, if you're seeing an infographic, if you're seeing some sort of, you know, when Cheryl's talking about 1 in 5, sometimes you see these charts and you're kind of like zoom in one person and now we see 5 figures and you can kind of just see the visual representation of it as it's happening. That could be something as well. So Cheryl, moving it forward, other folks feel like, you know, this was really captivating at something recently, or this didn't work at something recently, or a long time ago, doesn't need to be recent.
If I could, and I think it's important to let folks know, and maybe this is already part of the presentation, but let folks know what's going to be done with the data, right? So maybe that's, you know, upfront and at the beginning, you're going to hear a lot of data. This is what we're planning on doing with this data. And I think that needs to be repeated several times. So.
Thank you for that input, Marcus. Yeah, I think that's responding to something I've experienced too, of people being like, well, we're going to talk about this. Is anything going to happen? Why are we even talking about this? So right, intentions with it, which has its own, sorry for the ringing in the background, has its own kind of embedded aspect of, well, what are they thinking? The people that we're talking to think should be done with it. Plus, are we coming with any intention ourselves in advance? And whether that's just we're reporting this back to the full body, which in turn will be responding and providing a report to the Board of Supervisors, or maybe something more specific than that. So others, or responding to what Marcus has said about, you know, well, what is going to be done and how do we communicate that with the things we're showing?
Well, if I could, it's even more than just, you know, going back to the board with it. As Cheryl has said, you know, at school districts, the common refrain is, okay, you're telling us something we already know. So what are you going to do about it? I have a hard time thinking that there's going to be any surprises to the people who are going to attend this meeting. Maybe there will be, but I think most folks have an idea that there's a disproportionality in both arrest and the disposition of cases. I think the question is, okay, you're presenting this, so what's going to happen with it to solve these problems that you're presenting to us?
Jeff, along those lines, we talked about this last night in our Racial Justice Coalition meeting, and thank you, Marcus, because it is more than that, because there's exactly the issue is what is the intention behind the numbers, but also it's not just what what are we going to do? What do you want us to do? Or what can we do to help the community? What is the intention about telling the community, and what is it that we need the community to do to on their end? These are the questions I'm telling you that came up. What is it that we need the community to do? What can the community do to assist? And then what is it? So, well, not only what is the body going to do? What is the body's intention to do with this data? What are the next steps to do with the data? But what is the community's role? And what are they expected to do with this data now that they know the information, or now that they have a better grasp of what we intend to do with this data? So this is what came up. So, I mean, we have to have an ask, as with all of this, and with any of these meetings that we go to, there has to be something. What is the ask of the community once we empower them with the information? So yes, there's going to be lots of people who already know the information. There's going to be some who say, well, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was like this. Or I thought it was worse. But once you have actual data that you can, not anecdotal information, but actual data that you can use, what do we expect them to do with it? And that always seems to be the quiet part, right?
Yes, I think that I'll jump in to say, yeah, I think that often can be where things stop, or it seems like there's a stall. And there is the complexity of our not bringing the answers, because this is supposed to be not just our delivering what we think it is, but also, right, just like for ourselves, we got to kick it off somewhere. And Chris got our outline and he gets us talking, right? Because if we just had a blank piece of paper and said, what are we doing for our forum? Doesn't get there. So we might consider, I'm just brainstorming as we're talking about this stuff, having not multiple choice, but kind of areas of consideration. Perhaps, would you, community, want to see not just a recommendation from the full RJOB, but action taken by individuals who are on the RJOB, independent of whether there's some sort of overall vote or decision from the Board of Supervisors, right? Which is something we've talked to various stages at the full quarterly meetings of. People here could choose to act, right? And people at the forum could say, well, why is the enforcement going on this way in the meantime? I'm probably not going to be able to have the supervisors say this or that offense shouldn't be prosecuted, or this should be the practice in the field when making contact, or this is how filing decisions are made, whatever that is. Kind of has to be the DA or sheriff or those different actors making the call. So without saying, do you think the prosecutor should not charge these offenses anymore? We could say something along the lines of, what do you think about the role that the district attorney may play, or the prosecution? And are there things that you would want to be seeing there? Or are there things in enforcement in the field, or the right, which is targeting, it's sort of priming the conversation. And there's always complexity of like, well, why are you starting there with the courts or with the sheriff or with whoever may be the actor? So we're at risk of going too far, but we're also at risk of maybe not going far enough if we don't give some structure, or be ready to jump in if there are crickets in the room when we get to the solutions part. I'm also aware that Marcus, you need to be out of here in 3 minutes. But we'll also have quorum still. Am I right? Because Kiki, Renell, me gets us to 3, and we're still okay.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
And we still want and need your input here, Marcus, just meaning we can still move forward. So thoughts, more on this of let's sticking with the bigger picture, as Cheryl's saying. Why are we doing what we're doing? We can have some of this of like how it'll roll out, but that bigger piece speaking to.
Yeah, so I would just throw in that I think the purpose of sharing data and accurately collecting and reporting data is always to help drive decision making, and or policy and practice change or program development. Now that does not mean that the RJOB itself has to get into the weeds of every policy or practice change that needs to be made, but it does give direction in terms of where priorities might be, where there may need to be some advocacy for certain types of changes, or at least changes within certain agencies or at certain decision points, and sort of highlighting those things. And I think, presenting that information to support with whatever community level advocacy there needs to be in order to, sort of move something like that, as well as put in, agencies or representatives from those agencies on notice about certain trends that they might want to begin to address or seek feedback around. What is always going to be a part of what we're trying to do with sharing that level of information. So just getting a sense of what the issues or troubling trends are, where we might start. And again, just making sure, because I think this has kind of come up in recent months and sort of talking about this. It's not saying that the RJOB has to sit down with a fine-tooth comb to go over this stuff itself. And I say that because obviously the RJOB has a list of recommendations that we do want to try to, get forward progress on. While there may be some things where we can be a little flexible, we do want to make sure that we're moving those things as much as possible. But we could definitely support those efforts in a number of ways, whether that's, sort of sharing this information, particularly with other collaborative spaces that might be directly involved with or addressing certain areas that we find, as well as presenting that information to community for community input and, community to develop ideas or concepts for how they would like to see these things addressed, as well as potentially supporting, those efforts with something like a resolution or statement in support, which we've done in the past after public comment has come to the RJOB. So I think, there are a number of different avenues that this body has without breaking its back to support this work. And again, the overall purpose, whenever you're talking about data in terms of systems like this, is to get a sense of what's happening and to attempt to drive decision making in a way that impacts these outcomes equitably.
Yeah, that packages it together for me in a way that makes sense. Because that seems to me almost like, well, yeah, that of course would have to be, but kind of need to think it through and to articulate it in the way that you were, Chris, that this allows us to make decisions. And you only need to have been through the task force for the years that came before to know that folks were saying, well, we can't make decisions until we get the data. So now we do have it. And clearly it was important to make decisions. And also accountability, which is tied in here, is that whoever it is that is in these spaces, and a lot of folks are elected, and if not, they're accountable in other spaces, to saying this is what we do, or we don't do that, and data can limit what can be said credibly and allow community to push back on things when they're not accurate. So yeah, that and thinking, including some of the things we're talking about of what could be done and how we might try to make suggestions. I'm thinking it's neutral-ish to be referring to the capacity fund and the youth advisory council, because those are already things where there has been public input, and it's not just like we're throwing it out there as these are ideas we have. This was something that generated out of the whole process before. So we might be saying, if you have thoughts on issues here, there's a place where it might be able to be taken up, right? We're talking about already in plan is money and technical assistance to community groups. And do you think there's anything in that process that you'd want to see if that's a tangible, something that this could be channeled in that way? Like, well, yeah, we should have more of these types of services. And also with Youth Advisory Council, is there any priming here of seeing this data? Are there things, if there were a space that was youth-led, that you would want them to be able to take on, or that if you were in that position that you would want to take on? So those are just kind of tangible type of concepts of what are we doing? What do we have in mind? Those could be places where specific policy ideas could be channeled. Other thoughts on the big picture? We can also start to turn to publicizing. Maybe I'm also thinking some thought in how we might want to approach the issue of what's missing, right? Chris was mentioning this, and it's included in the outline of there'll be some, it'll be apparent somehow, and we'll need to communicate, well, we are missing some things and we have asked for them, right? And how we want to go about doing that, because it's want to kind of highlight some of the things that are uncomfortable potentially, right? That may be seen as calling out or criticizing in some way. So before we're kind of stumbling in that space, or might be saying, we did ask this of sheriff or district attorney and haven't yet gotten back, that could be ripe for our consideration in advance of, well, yeah, we don't pull punches and we say it this way, or this is how we would do it because it's sensitive and we've got folks that are in this same body and we want to continue to have the working relationships, and well, other people's thoughts on that are not mine.
Yeah, I would just throw out, I don't think it's necessary to be, I think people, when they hear that information, can make whatever inferences they can and will make regardless of what we say. So I think the point is just to put that information out there so that folks know what this body has done, right? Which essentially in many ways is its due diligence, right? In terms of this, right? It's not like we, or it's not like you all have not reached out to the right folks, or that you left folks sort of out of this analysis maybe, but that those requests have been made and you're still maybe awaiting feedback or awaiting approval. And in some cases, folks have communicated difficulty with just being able to share it back, right? Those are just facts. They don't have to be presented with any sort of slant necessarily, depending on who's hosting it. But literally, I think just making people aware of those facts, right, that we've asked and that we're continuing to work with and request this information. And we hope to be able to come back to you with more of this information in the near future. And by the way, it'll be on this website as well.
Well, yeah. And sometimes just talking it back and forth can give a little bit more shape to what we're talking about. because I'm certainly thinking, yeah, that we wouldn't be having our gloss on it, and like, that's too bad that we haven't gotten it, or there's not a good reason why we haven't gotten it, isn't helpful, and it's us guessing most of the time. But even stating what I think is important, that, yeah, we're not going to suggest that we haven't asked for it, right? We have to make clear that the request was made and it was done in a way that, so the level of detail there, the directness, because there can be this kind of polite way to maybe excuse it in the space of like, well, we'll keep trying, and, you know, best something like that, because it can certainly be received by people on the other end of like, well, did you actually make the request, and how hard have you been trying to get it? So if we're going to be coming in this space and getting folks interested to be saying, it's been made, and these are, maybe we're prepared to say, these are the number of times that it's been made, and this is the way that we have made it. And they did acknowledge receiving it and have told us that they will give it, which is not anything other than facts, right? As Chris is saying, that's just more detail of not like, we did try. I guess I'm expanding on, Chris, what you were saying is, yeah, given the history and prepared to give all the details of the history, that these are not first time requests. These are the ways that we made them. And that if folks want to follow up even more of, well, who actually made it and who said that they received it, then this is the place to be sharing that stuff, to be given the detail of, this is how we got all the stuff, and why we don't have what we don't have. I can only tell you what I know is we made the request, and this is what we heard back last time. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just also add in there, gentle pushback in times where there can be, assuming best intentions of all parties. It was just related to me by a colleague in a different space where it's not this, but basically someone on the other end saying, oh, well, you just need to ask us, or we haven't heard that before, or we've already given those things, or whatever it may be, to be prepared to be pushing back if, well, that's not the information that we have from last time, right? Because again, this is just kind of the awkwardness factor of like, well, we're all institutional actors here. So, which isn't to say that's not true, as much as holding on to the things that we know, and just that history. So it's talking about the thing before it's happened, but it's kind of speaking to our intention as we're going to come up on some unknown things, which is also my experience with sessions like these, of like, well, we didn't expect it was going to go in this direction, and now people are really wanting to know on this one particular point and how we will go there, or it's getting pretty tense about this one actor and how we will respond to that, so that we're not vilifying, but we're also not protecting inappropriately or preventing some accurate information. My Brown Act mind is coming back again, right? Like, there isn't anything that would be politic to keep out. It's just sharing, this is what has happened. Enough talking on my end. I invite others to chime in if they have thoughts on this or anything else. Still on the data sharing. I think if I'm just remembering, as we were talking in advance of this meeting, we were really intending on spending much of this time on this. So I want to reserve a little bit for the remainder, but also feel like, yeah, that this is what we wanted to have the bulk of our time. So I'm not too concerned that we're spending, let's reserve maybe 10 minutes for the remainder, I think. But if there's more that we can do here, we haven't been able to hit this stuff on the data session, and we're talking about it now. So let's try to give the chance that we can on it. I'll pivot as a invitation for input on feedback on how data is presented. I was mentioning the video stuff, Cheryl, the event that you invited me to watched that film about racially charged misdemeanor practice in our country. I don't remember exactly what the language was, but it's something like that. And I thought, well, yeah, maybe take a snippet from that to kind of give perspective to folks of what are we talking about with these charging decisions and right. That. So that's something I would be thinking could be. So Cheryl, you unmuted? I'm thinking that and anything else similar. 13th, whatever it may be, people are thinking there's a really good snippet in this we might take from, or other thoughts. But Cheryl. I'm worried I'm having my audio thing again. Others hearing? No, not right now. Okay. Cheryl, whenever your audio comes back, you got first position to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm hearing that.
Yeah. I don't know. How long is this meeting?
Our meeting ends at 4:30.
No, not this
Oh,
one, the community forum.
2 hours, I think, is what we were, maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours. I think we're also kind of hammering out what that would be, but that's what I remember us kind of along the lines of.
I guess I'm trying to picture. I'm trying to picture the setup and kind of how we would structure the setup, right? We could probably, like you said, pull something out of the racially charged. It is something that a lot of people don't know or haven't seen, and we heard that feedback, right? They didn't know how much misdemeanors had an effect on people's lives. And I think the data, it's a data subcommittee for those of you who haven't been to those meetings. As many meetings as I go to, and as much as I look at this information, every time I see new data, it does, as much as you think you may know, it does give you pause when you find out what's going on in this county and the state. And I do think that some of the data will have people take a pause. As much as you think you know, you don't know. So because it's such serious information, I think that's why I keep beating on how it's presented, right? A lot of people are very visual, and they don't like looking at a lot of words on paper, and they don't like looking at a lot of numbers on paper. So I go back to how we did our, even our Measure X presentations, Jeff, and our presentations to the Board of Supervisors. We've done a few of those. So I would say maybe we look at those as examples because they were colorful, and they were built with the community in mind. So I think it's going back to think about really community centering the presentations rather than data centering the community, the presentations is where I keep coming back to, is who is the audience versus centering the presentation around the information.
Yeah, I really like that. No, please, I didn't want to cut off.
No, you're fine. No, I mean, I guess that's where I want to stop, is like, who is the audience and what do we want them to get out of it? And going back to what Chris said earlier, is not that people don't have the intellectual or mental capacity to understand it. It's just that honestly, people don't have the patience to try and understand this. It's so much information. So the more we can put it in a format that we know is more pleasing and readily acceptable in um, in form and substance to them, I think we can draw people in if it's engaging to them. So yeah, maybe community centering it and putting it in not too many words on each slide, and making it colorful and making it each side be very powerful and impactful, and each one have a title that speaks to what we're talking about. There's a diversion slide, there's an adult probation slide, there's a probation slide dealing with juvenile justice, there's a slide dealing with the juvenile system. There is a racial justice background, but even the slide that deals with how we even came up with the Racial Justice Coalition has to be very bullet point and very short. The one that's dealing with how we came up with the Racial Justice Task Force has to be very short and bullet points. The one that comes up with the oversight body has to be just, it's got to hit them with why we're here, and why you're here right now. How we got to this point, it can't be more than 5 to 7 minutes. Any longer than that, you lose the audience. And I'm telling you guys this because I present and I speak in public a lot. And I just know that people's attention span is very short. So you gotta grab them from the first, 30, 60 seconds. And each slide's gotta be very impactful so they remember and then they can ask questions. And I don't think you do the whole show at once. I think you show some slides, you invite the audience in. You show some more slides, you invite the audience in. You show some more slides, you invite the audience in. Don't do a whole slideshow and then invite the audience. I think you show them disregard that way, then it's not a community conversation. I think it's us talking to them rather than them being engaged. So the way that I know that has worked for me, working with the ACLU and WAPA and other groups like that, is that the more you can get the audience engaged and truly participatory throughout the entire experience, the more they will take away and want to continue to work in concert with what we're doing. So that's it's more than 5 cents. In my 25 cents worth.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
As you can see, I'm home now. So
yeah, well, right. So now able to. So thank you. I think that all of that is well taken. Directness, the way of too much language, trying to learn from lessons we've had before, and I think it'll be a major step to be having Shayla and Renell as our facilitators to be able to take it out of lawyer jargon business. And as you were saying, community focused, not data centered. We're at the last 10 minutes. So we talked about transitioning here to our next. Chris, I see you unmuted.
Yep, just before you do that, hate to complicate it because I knew you were going to want to move since you had earmarked the time, but I am curious just because the next time we're having this conversation in this group will be in January, where we will want to be nailing this down, and we will want to have, I'm going to say we would want, that it's going to be difficult, but we would like to have something to show, if not at the January meeting, then at least for the February quarterly, to show everybody like this is the deck and these are the discussion questions that we have, what I mean? Like we should have that together by then. But I wanted to ask folks if they have any thoughts about, so we talked a little bit about how to host the meeting because we know we're anticipating is going to be virtual. And so we're talking about doing it webinar style, but recognizing that or at least I should say somebody brought up webinar style, but we know that can sort of discourage the level of conversation that we want to have. And I forget where we came out. I think we came out on just doing sort of a regular Zoom call, but having folks on mute when they all come in such that, feedback and whatnot don't disrupt as the agenda begins, but then being able to have folks come off mute and, get in there whenever necessary. But just wanted to run that by folks to see if there was any feedback before we end the sort of discussion on this.
This ain't even my committee, but I'm gonna tell you anyway.
Since no one else is talking, go ahead.
There's nobody else talking. I feel like I got to talk. Now, webinar, and I tell you, webinars are good for certain things. I know my board meetings and stuff like that is good. But I tell you, the frustrating part, and I say this to ACLU all the time, the frustrating part about webinars is it discourages interactivity. And if this is a community meeting, this is a community meeting that needs to just be a community meeting. It needs to be a regular Zoom meeting since we can't meet in person. I get it about how hard it is to keep people on mute, and I don't want to hear your dog or you fussing at your child in the background and all of that. But it is what it is. And that's the times we live in. So we got to have somebody who's going to be vigilant on the trigger to mute somebody if they hear the noise in the background, if they forget to mute themselves. But it's a community meeting, and it's the same as if we were in person and somebody's child starts crying, and you got to walk them outside. But a community meeting needs to feel whole, and they need to feel inclusive, and they need to feel part of the conversation. And you're not part of the conversation when you have to wait till the end, till somebody takes you out of the attendee to bring you into the meeting. And webinars don't allow you to feel included in the conversation.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that in my experience that, already it's pretty foreign, and you got to be having some tech privilege to be able to do the Zoom meeting to begin with. And then anytime it's modified a little bit, then it's like, this is a whole other thing I need to learn. That's not how I usually do a meeting. Probably not going to even say anything. So yeah, so long as we have the ability to use the controls that are in place on this thing. If you're the host, then you can mute anybody, and you could even prevent them, I think, from unmuting themselves if you do the controls that way. So the power is there for whatever we'd want to do the webinar, I think, and just keep the format so that we can have it not disruptive. And Chris.
I would add really quickly, you should be able to assign co-hosts, so you can have more than one person doing that, to just make sure that, you're sort of disallowing distractions while encouraging maximum participation. And with that, I will stop interrupting the flow of the meeting to the next item.
No, not at all. I think that we needed to hit that point. And right, just staying on the same thought with it, you were reminding me of having another person, is some of it to be muting folks when necessary, inviting things on the chat, and then also having tech help, because we're asking Renelle and Shayla to already do the part of communicating to people and responding to what they're saying, and not make sure that we're not putting people in the place of like, I need to move my slide forward, right? So having someone else to be handling the flow of the things of which window is showing, and make sure that we have delegated things, because that's about as common as it can be at one of these Zoom meetings. Just people like, I thought I had my window up, this isn't working. Make sure that we have delegated different parts so that people can only focus on the thing that they need to do to set up to win. Okay, saving these notes, we got 3 minutes left with JSL's notes. Okay, saving in my downloads and we're good. So that info will be captured, and I'll just, I guess it's in our video, but I'll be able to send to ORJ folks afterwards, so that we're just capturing those notes. And yeah, this is info about the Santa Clara County Youth Advisory Council. And Joanna, have you provided this to us?
Yes.
Thank you. And I think I'm rudely turning to it as we have 2 minutes left to discuss. But maybe I could just give you a moment to introduce this.
Sure, yeah. So you can definitely review it and kind of see what does or does not make sense for you all's thinking in terms of a youth advisory council. I think the only thing I'll highlight are 2 things that we would actually recommend doing a little bit differently. And that is 1, having the council be outside of any justice system agency. So you'll see with Santa Clara's council, they have a probation officer on the council. It's funded by probation, and as much as the CBO can really own the council, and if even a county agency outside of a justice system agency can fund it, the better for it having autonomy and really being able to at times provide a critical eye to the system. So that, and then the other piece is I'm totally blanking. There's one other thing, maybe if we can scroll down just a little bit.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe it's distracting as I'm typing as we're talking.
No, you're fine. So the justice system agency piece. I'm hoping it'll come back. Definitely the stipend piece has been critical, both for engagement and also just for recognizing the expertise of the young people. That might be something that's already been discussed here.
We did, but maybe not in as much detail. So yeah, I'm going to put a little asterisk there.
Okay.
And we will definitely be coming back to this because we've only allotted the 2 minutes of this meeting. So you're priming it for us.
I remembered.
Yes.
Okay. As much as it can be formalized that the Youth Advisory Council really holds authority, so they're providing, maybe they're voting members, they're able to vote on recommendations that are coming forward and also make their own recommendations that are going to those decision-making members, et cetera. So in a sense, it's not a tokenized council, but it's really helping to lead the work of RJOB. So those are just the 2 main things I wanted to highlight to start with.
Thank you. That does help us orient, and as we're looking through this model, or as a jumping off point, we can have that in mind. And I know that this was responding to what we had talked about at our last subcommittee. Is it would be great to have some intel on what goes on in other places so that we can have the concept of a model. So thank you for bringing this to us and giving us the chance to think on it a bit before we return for our next meeting, which will be in the new year. So I think this is the appropriate time for me to be saying, hope everyone has great holidays. We'll be in contact in different ways between now and then, because no doubt the work continues. But at least in this specific subcommittee space, we'll be next in contact in 2022. So respect to the work that we've done together in this year, and that our commitment to continue doing. I think we've got some really worthy campaigns here that we're moving forward, and it'll take our continued push and energy and attention like we've been doing to move them forward as we have been. So I appreciate you all, and look forward to continuing the work together. Bye, everybody.
Yay. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See you next year.